Let's quote our purpose for Bible study. I don't know how I'm getting by this later. Let's quote it, y'all. Let's go. Our purpose is to study the Bible more frequently, which leads to us loving God more fervently, which leads to us thinking, speaking, acting, and responding more biblically. After studying the Bible, these are the things that are supposed to take place with us. If not overnight, at least one night. That'll catch up with you. And for those of you who've been with me for 20 plus years, doing Bible study, this stuff supposed to be happening big time in our lives now, the way we think, speak, act, and respond to God's word. Well, tonight, December the 17th, we are continuing to talk about biblical paradoxes, biblical conundrums, things that kind of don't make sense. A paradox is like, it seems like it's a contradiction, but it can be true when it's properly understood. That's what a paradox is. It's something that may seem like a contradiction, but it can be true when it's properly understood. And so we're going to look at that tonight. Do any of you have family members or friends or associates, acquaintances that they just real smart? I mean, just smart. I mean, they don't even have to read the book, because, I mean, they could have wrote the book smart, They got all the senses in the world and intellectually, if you will, I mean, they just got it going on. I'm looking across this room. It's quite a few of y'all here tonight. I tell people all the time, people try to say, I am not smart. I just work hard. I'll tell you that. I'm not smart. I just work hard. But all of us have those people in our lives, or we've been that person in other folks' lives, where we just kind of had all of that. We're just too smart. We just had, all of the answers. Well, unbelievers look at believers, true believers, as fools, because everything logical for them that we don't embrace, and everything illogical for us, for them rather, that we embrace, it makes us look like fools. I mean, we say things, dying to ourselves daily and all kind of things, we use all kind of terms, we talk about all type of things, and it just, we seem like fools to the intellectual wise who, based on God, are fools. But because we have the wisdom of God as believers, true believers, our wisdom of God seems like foolishness to them. And so tonight I want to try to make sense out of something that don't make sense, and that's how and why fools hate knowledge. Just think of the play on that. I told you a paradox is a seeming contradiction that can be true when it's properly understood. So how and why is it that a fool hates knowledge? I mean, that just don't make sense. I mean, because, knowledge is what gives us capacity, intellect, authority. In some cases, people would say power or whatever. So how is it that someone who would be considered a wise intellectual person, how is it that they hate knowledge? Well, we're going to try to unpack that tonight with this, making sense of those paradoxes, conundrums, enigmas that don't make sense to the natural man. My opening thought says, since being wise in the Bible has nothing to do with intelligence, then there really isn't a significant difference between a fool and a fool. There's really no significant difference between a fool and a fool. I know, as I said off camera, our parents, at least in our days, I think children may call their parents fools now, but in our days, that just was, we couldn't say that word. That word, that was a restriction. You don't use that word, and we certainly didn't use it about talking about each other as brothers and sisters. You just you didn't do that. But I'm not going to talk about it from the definition that we were using as children to our siblings or others. I want to talk about it from the true definition. And I guess I should say the truth definition, since God is the what? Truth. He's the living word. He's the written word. And so, since, as I said, as it relates to God, wisdom has nothing to do with intellect, then there can't be a very significant difference between being a fool and a fool. My opening statement says, so when we're talking about a fool, we're not just talking about someone who's ignorant or somebody who's irresponsible or somebody who's stupid or somebody who's uninformed or unintelligent. We're talking about a fool in the sense that God has defined a fool, and that designates a fool as one who rejects him. Did you get that? We're going to walk through that. God's definition of fool is someone who rejects him. Think about that for a minute, because, I mean, now we thinking about fools in our lives. Someone who rejects him, rejects his word, rejects his truth. And as obvious as it is, which I'll share in just a minute, I mean, that person really has to be a fool to reject that God is God. So again, we're not just talking about person in regards to lack of intellect or intelligence. We're talking about a person who rejects God. That's who he designates as a fool. Psalm 14:1. We're gonna look at that verse. A very, very familiar one. Psalm 14:1. Y'all could probably quote the whole verse. It says, the fool has said in his or her heart, excuse me, there is no God. They are corrupt and have committed abominable deeds. There is no one who does good. Did y'all get that? That verse said, the fool has said in his or her heart that there is no God. And I wrote some things that they're not on your notes, but I kind of went on a tangent with this, so just bear with me a little foolishness for a moment. The person who Psalm 14:1 is speaking of, this is the person who can look at the universe and all of its vast complexities, all the way down into the micro and macro creation, the big things, the big celestial stars, down to atoms, ATOMS. And we talked a couple weeks ago about that, neutrons and protons and electrons, and this DNA, strands of DNA and all of that. The person, matter of fact, did you know, and I know I'm going to get it wrong. God, I shouldn't even brought it up. But they say in every person's life, there is enough DNA that if you took it out of the person and you made it like a strand, it's enough to go from the earth to the moon and back, I want to say about 8 times. That's how much DNA that each human carries. Let's think about that. And so, Psalms 14, the fool has said in the heart, there is no God. That's the person who looks at all of this creation, macro and micro, and say, nobody made this, Even the human body is an accident. It came in as it relates to revolution. A fool, this is a person who can acknowledge personhood. They can acknowledge personality. They can acknowledge intellect and all the full range of emotions, and yet say all of that came from nothing. Think about how we go from hot to cold. Some of y'all, you may have rode here with your husbands and wives to church tonight and Bible study and, that little short ride in between here. You know how many times we went back and forth? We acknowledge you can be loving one moment and you can be something else the next moment, all right? You can be speaking good 1 second and be saying something else the very next second. Matter of fact, what's that thing? Good and bad be coming out your mouths at the very same time. We have all these personalities. We have, you can look at a person and touch and feel them as a tangible thing and have a full range of emotions, crying, laughter, joy, and all that. And you say all of that came from nothing. It did not come from another person. The practical atheist who can say that they acknowledge that there's right and wrong in the world. They say, I acknowledge that there's truth and error in the world. They acknowledge that there is the real and the false in the world. And they acknowledge there are moral laws that are clear across the globe to all humankind, and yet reject the idea that moral law came from a moral being. On fact, that it came from any being at all, because they reject God. A person who rejects God is a person who says this: I'm content with nobody, all right, times nothing equaling everything. Did you get that? I just tried to say it that way. A fool, literally, they're content with having no way to, describe and define it. They're content with saying that nobody times nothing equals everything. And then the everything encompasses personhood and morality, and all of that still came from nothing. Yeah, you have personality. Yeah, you have this. Yeah, you have all that, but that came from nothing. You just got it from nowhere. That's a fool. That's the foundation of insanity, of all insanities. To say that the greatest cause, which is the universe, the greatest cause, human beings, the greatest cause, the universe, you say that the effect of the universe has no cause. So just talking from a philosophical standpoint, and there's a reason why I wanted to talk from a philosophical standpoint. To deny God, to deny the source of everything that exists is foolish. That's a fool. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Not because they come to an intellectual or rational conclusion. That is, neither intellect or rational. Look at the rest of that verse. It tells you why they come to that. It says they are corrupt, they have committed abominable deeds, there's no one who what? Does good. That's the real issue. That's really the answer. Sinners don't want God. Fools who reject God. Sinners who live apart from God. We're all sinners, even those who are saved by grace. But I'm not talking about the sinners saved by grace. But sinners don't want God because they don't want a just judge. I'm going to say this out here one more time for y'all, and I'm going to leave y'all to fill in your own politics. Sinners don't want a just judge. I think somebody got, okay, I said it slow. I think some of y'all picked up on it. Some of y'all got it. We'll talk about that off camera. Yeah, sinners don't want a just judge. Y'all, there are more people who will go to hell than there will go to heaven. There are more false teachers than they are true teachers. They're more false Christians than they are false Christians. So the overwhelming desire is not to accept God, but to reject God. The fool says in the heart, there's no God. Not just because they don't want to, with all that evolution stuff. The reason why I said it is because what the rest of the verse say. They're corrupt. They have committed abominable deeds. And there's none who does good. So you got to understand, sinners don't want God because they don't want a just judge. They don't want accountability. They don't want an evaluation of their behavior. They don't want punishment. They don't want condemnation. And God offers all of that to every one of us. Condemnation, punishment. He evaluates our behavior. You got to be accountable to him. Sinners don't want that. So when it says the fool has said in their heart there is no God, the reason being is because they are corrupt. That takes us back to that thing we talked about a couple of months ago, original sin. For those who believe that human depravity, don't believe that we acquired the original sin from Adam. This right here tells us we did. So, back to under my commentary. Psalm 14:1 says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So with that, that's the essential pathology of foolishness. When you get to pulling all the stuff out of foolishness, that's it right there. A rejection of God. It may not be overly outward and overt. It may be something that the fool says in their heart, but there is in the heart of the fool the sense that there is no God. Y'all know, when we were children, if our parents would leave us for a little while, a couple hours, we would act like kids. They ain't got no parents. Come on now. We would act like kids who didn't have strict parents and all of that. Because why? Back to my thing. First of all, we didn't like what our parents told us, all right? We didn't feel they was ever right? Come on now. We felt like their judgments wasn't just. We didn't want to be accountable. We didn't like the way they would evaluate our behavior as children. When they say, you bad. We didn't want punishment because when you tell a 1-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, you're going to punish, no. You certainly don't want an our-sense condemnation, punishment for children. They don't want that. And so they try to live in the absence of their parents as if they have no parents. And they're right. And then if we have a brother and sister who wanted to do right when we had the opportunity to do wrong, we call that person a fool. Y'all with me? Y'all with me? Because I remember that times when my siblings be doing something mom and daddy said when mom and dad wasn't at home. I said, man, fool. Man, you fool. I ain't finna do that. I'll do that later. I got time. I ain't finna do that. You making up your bed? Man, please. Mama went to Food Town. That's over there off of Belford and Jutland. Man, Mama gonna be gone 45 minutes to an hour. No, she's gonna be gone an hour and 45 minutes because that store stay packed because they have them 8 cans of corn in the can for $8. Y'all remember, I'm dating myself. You can go to Food Town, you can get 8 cans of corn for 8 cans of corn for $1. Shoot, Mama be in there getting that corn and all that other stuff. I knew how much time I had. I don't be doing right and she's gone. Same thing that people think about God. Why would we do right? He ain't here. Why would we do right and he can't see us? See, back in our day, we had neighbors who could see. Look here. Miss Porter, Miss Smith, I'm calling out some names. Bless their heart, they all going to heaven now. Miss Boutte, Miss Williams, Miss Lovett May, Miss Stella May, boy, all of them. Boy, listen here, they never always shop at the same time. Somebody catch that in a minute. So we always had parental eyes on us. There wasn't no cell phone, but soon as mama got home, that phone would ring. You try to run and answer it. Yeah, let me speak to Eve May. Mama, boy, I seen your mama come home. Put your mama on the phone. And I knew them eternal eyes had saw me. And the report was coming in. And so, folk, I'm trying to make us understand this. We live like fools when we don't want to have that kind of, accountability or judgment or punishment. That's why they reject God. They don't want that kind of God. Reading on. As I said, it may be over it. It may be something that you say and you may not be over it, but there is the heart the sense that there is no God. We live like it. So that's the theological conclusion, y'all. I'm not making this up. This is what the Bible says. Okay? There is no God. So the fool says in their heart, not because it's intellectually sensible, but because he or she don't want to have to be accountable to any transcendent supernatural deity. The atheist says there's no God because they're like, man, I'm not going to sit there and look like a fool and be living to some rules and some laws from a God I can't see, feel, or, don't talk to me when I holler at him. The psalmist goes on to further describe the pathology of human depravity. All human beings come into the world with this condition. We are all corrupt. We all begin by committing abominable deeds. I tell you all the time, your kids, them little cute babies, them little vipers in the diaper, come on now, except for, grandkids. We ain't counting grandkids, right? My children. Man, our children do stuff and you wonder where they get that from. Where they get that from? You don't have to, teach them that. They don't, when you go to bed, jump out of the crib, go take a night class on how to be evil or mean or selfish, disrespecting adults, all of that stuff. They don't take no classes for that. So the psalmist, he describes the pathology of human depravity. All human beings coming in this world in this condition. We are all corrupt. We all begin by committing abominable deeds. And the reason is at the end of verse 1. Because there is no one who does good. Next time you hear that person tell you, I'm a good person, just, depending on what type of relationship you got with them. But you could quote them this verse right here. What do you mean good? Again, this is a statement about universal human depravity. That's all of us, y'all. Verse 2 in Psalms 14. Look what verse 2 says in Psalm 14. Verse 2 in Psalm 14 says, the Lord has looked down from heaven upon the sons of men to see if there are any who understands or who seek after God. And the conclusion is, they have all turned aside together, collectively. Not some of humanity, but all of humanity have become corrupt. There's no one who does good, not even one. Now, there again, you have the pathology of human depravity. Fools, they reject God because they are so bound in their sin and aware of what sin is and possessing the guilt because God given them a conscience and a fear of punishment in human psyche. So your kid know when they do wrong. We know when we do wrong. Cain didn't take no class, but when God asked him, what's wrong with you, Cain? You know, your face all down, y'all, what's going on in his human psyche? God made it so that that person would know when they did wrong. That's what it's saying here. Your children, when they know they've done wrong. They know they've done wrong. So going back to what I said at the end of the page, fools that reject God because they're bound in their sin, and they're aware of what sin is. They know you told them not to eat them cookies, and they ate them cookies. They know you told them what not to do, but they still did it because they're bound in the sin. And so when they get busted, they begin to processing, if you will, the guilt. But we all possess guilt, but then we process it when righteousness stands before us. When we are questioned with righteousness, did you do that? And we get to processing the guilt in our mind and our hearts, and then we still lie. No. You know, now I mean just a professional gifted liar. I mean an expert liar. Man, they got a defense reference. They don't have you know when, because you know when you got to process it. Mom, dad ask you a question, you go, just give me a second. Because you're trying to figure out, if I say this, she going to come back with that. If I say this, he going to say that. Okay, I got a good answer for that. No. Because we get to processing our guilt and building up our own defense. Y'all, that's us. We come here like that. It says, back page, they deliver themselves from that guilt and the fear of punishment by eliminating God altogether. So that's what an atheist does. That's what a fool does. You know what? I ain't going to believe in God. So if I don't believe in God, I deliver myself from punishment. I deliver myself from guilt. I deliver myself from accountability. So all I got to do is just don't believe in God, and I'm good. That's what a fool says. Just don't believe in the God. And I just told you, when we look at humans, when we look at all of the stuff, when we look at creation, when we look at ourselves, when we scratch ourselves and the skin grow back and the hair grow back, when, you know, when all of this stuff, you know. And we believe that there is no God. Yeah, this is universal. Matter of fact, we're going to look at Romans chapter 3, verses 10 through 11. It's so universal that Paul borrowed. Remember, this is New Testament. Look at what Paul says. It says, as it is written, there is none righteous, not even one. That sound familiar? That's Psalms 14. It says, there's none who understands, and there's none who seeks God. That sound familiar? All have turned aside. Together they have become useless. There is none who does good. There is not even one. So in these verses, Paul describes human depravity. Notice the word all. It appears a number of times, as does the word none. So when you put all the alls and all the nones, y'all, that makes an indictment, a universal indictment. Not black folk, not white folk, folk, okay? Not brown folk, not Latino folk, not smart folk, not dumb folk, not folk born back in the backwoods or someplace in third world country, or some person born in the suburbs with a silver spoon in their mouth, but all. One side, whatever track you stay on, all. No matter what private school you went to, all. Yeah, that's not one. I tell you, we don't seek after God. God seeks after us. And boy, I'm so grateful for that, because I wouldn't seek after him on my own. So, the defining character of the person called a fool is the person who rejects the existence of God. Now again, you may never ever say it with that person, may never say it with their lips or their mouth, but Lord, if they say it with their lives, they're still a fool. You ever talk to your children and you gave them something rational, common sense, just made common sense to everybody? the dog was sitting there watching you and the parent and the child have a conversation, and y'all kind of going back at it, and the dog, when it got through with it, looked at the parent, and the dog went, even the dog understood what the parent was saying to the child, you know what I'm saying, was right. But the child walked away as if it didn't make sense, or they rejected it. Because again, it meant accountability, responsibility, it meant punishment or judgment. It meant the things that they didn't want. So they would reject the existence of a parent being right, or maybe even existing, if you will, because they would treat you as if you're not even there, disrespecting you. That's a fool. The defining character of a person called a fool is rejection of the existence of God in any God who has authority over their life, any right to judge his or her life, and the desire to be freed up to express corruption in every form. See, the defining character then of a fool has a theological component, a rejection of God, a moral component, and they do abominable deeds. Look at Titus 3:3. Notice what he says in Titus 3:3. For we also once were foolish, ourselves, disobedient, ourselves, deceived, ourselves, enslaved to various lusts and pleasures, ourselves, and we spent our lives in malice and envy, being hateful and hating one another. We all did that. Everyone was a human being. We did that. Original sin, human depravity, born with it. We all were once in that condition according to Titus 3:3. That's what foolishness is. It starts with rejecting God because there's a love of abominable deeds. It can be then characterized as by Paul as when we are disobedient, when we are deceitful, when we are enslaved to various lusts, when we're enslaved to pleasures that aren't pleasing to God, and when we spend our life in evil and envy, hateful and hating one another. Y'all, that is fool. A fool is characterized by that. That's why it breaks my heart when I'm around Christians and they justify hating a group of people based on what race, ethnicity, whatever, education, separate riches, poor, whatever, location. I'm like, but you're a Christian. We once were like that. We ain't supposed to be like that now. They're characterized folk who rejected God. You really can't mean that now. See, that's a fool. And it breaks my heart. But there are fools who preach the gospel, who justify these very things right here in their preaching. And y'all, that's a fool. That's how we once were. But for those of us in Christ, y'all, we can't be like that. We're supposed to be transforming from that to more into what? The image of God. We're supposed to be going from glory to glory. Our lives supposed to start reflecting God and not so much what? Ourselves. In Romans chapter 1, verses 21 through 22, that I would always encourage you to read Romans 1, reminding us some things. But I just want to deal with 21 through 22. It says, for even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. How many of us, we may not remember when we were like that, but how many of us remember our children being just like that? You know, we're too young. We're too foolish to see our foolishness. But y'all, we all were like that. Back up verse 21. I want to say it again. I want to dip this in the chocolate one more time. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks because they became futile in not what was right, but in their speculations. And their hearts got dark. Their foolish hearts got dark. Yeah. So in Romans 1, 21 through 22, that's a further description of the fallenness of man or fool. See, it's not that humans are not religious. Mankind or humans are invertebrate, deep-seated worshipers. But it is our nature to reject the true God because we don't want accountability to God's moral law. And so they, fools, invent a God after their own making in the form of some animal, some created creature that the fool perceives in some sense as less than himself. Now, so you know, we laugh at the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt and they was making them calves, them golden calves to worship. You know, we laugh at that. That's stupid. They putting that idol. They're finna worship that idol. That's what fools do, right? Yeah, worship idols. It's foolishness by definition is the absence of faith and trust in the knowledge of the true and living God. So whether we acknowledge it or not, the whole world is full of fools. If they reject God, how dare we create something? Because that's what it tells us in Romans chapter 1. We create something to worship instead of rejecting the one who worshiping the one who created us. We create something to worship. Let me see if I can say that right. We create something to worship other than God. We reject the God who created us. That's a fool. And then you create something less than you to worship. That's a fool. You know, we let material things, cars, homes, money, cash, association, education, we let all of that stuff, you know, we worship that stuff, which is less than him who created us. Y'all, we can do without all those things, but we can't do without God. Now, I'm going to read something here. Yeah, let me go ahead and read it. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and then we're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, for the sake of time. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14 tells us that God, well, let me read it first. It says, but a natural man, that's the one, you know, not spiritual, does not accept the things of the Spirit of God. Why? They're right there. But they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually appraised. That verse tells us that God is foolishness to fools as God defines them, meaning reject him. So a fool sees through foolish eyes and turns everything into foolishness. So when the fool looks at the life of a faithful follower of Christ, through his foolish eyes, his or her foolish eyes, we look like fools serving and sacrificing and surrendering our lives to this God we can't see. So to the fools who are defined by God as those who reject him, we look like fools. When the truth of the matter is, we're the ones who possess wisdom, godly wisdom. They are, in fact, the fools, based on God's definition. Think about that for a second. And that's why, I want to teach the Bible. I want to educate us. I want us to come to know. I want us, men, leaders, I want us to live in such a way that we're examples. I want our families to be examples so people can see God through our lives. They can see the difference through our lives. But when folk don't see that, a fool sees our lives and is not obedient to what the Word of God says, that fool says, ain't no sense in being a fool like that fool. Because if that's what it means to serve God, shoot, I could do that by myself. When the fool sees those who claim to be faithful doing the stuff that fools do, the fool think it's foolish for us to identify ourselves as children of God. And you got to understand, because their minds are darkened, even our righteousness look like foolishness to them. They can't see it. Let me say this. Let me say this. Corinth, I've told you about this, name, place of a harlot, or home of the harlot, or whatever. Corinth, city, it was known for its philosophy. It was known for its decadence. It was known for its immorality. I've been to the city a couple of times, but yet it was the center of philosophy. That's where all of the intellectual people would come to Greece, and they would stand and they would pontificate. They would, elucidate. They would masticate, rumors of their own intellectual, and that's where you come up with all these Greek gods. So in Corinth, there were all kind of stuff. They had the worshiping of Greek deities, the worshiping of Roman deities, the worshiping of Egyptian deities. They had all this stuff, and those were seaport towns, so sailors would come in. I told you, it was known for its debauchery. It was known for its lasciviousness. It was known for its sexual immorality. The people at the church of Corinth, they would have communion of the Lord, push the stuff off the table, and the same table they had communion for the Lord, they would have orgies on it the same night. That's what Corinth was. So when people, go to Corinth, talk about, chapters 12 and 13, about, I speak of like, that's the wrong place to go. Because the book of Corinth ain't about spiritual people. That's why they got 2 long letters. Actually, they said there were 3 letters written, but they have 2 long letters because of their immorality, their decadence. It was the center of philosophy. And you got to understand, it was a wealthy cosmopolitan. It wasn't no broke city. Corinth was, to live in Corinth, man, you paid high rent in Corinth. So people, Stoics, philosophers, they would all come and spew their philosophies. And then you had these immoral people, immature Christians, who would gravitate to that. That's what Corinth became known for. So when you see all of this stuff, and then Jesus just kind of slapped it in the face, he said, listen, those folk don't even know me. The natural man, they can't accept the things of God. That's why they got to come up with a Greek god, Aphrodite. They had deities of Aphrodite and Zeus and all of these people. All of that stuff came out of there. You understand what I'm saying? It was a city known for its intellectual capacity, but it was a foolish city because intellect does not make one wise. And if that intellectual rejects God, they remain a fool. Reading on. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 18 through 20, and just another chapter over. It says, let no man deceive himself. If any man among you thinks that he is wise in his age, and you got to understand again why he's saying this, I just got to tell you about Corinth. If anyone thinks he's wise in his age, he must become foolish so that he may become wise. Listen to that conundrum. Listen to that paradox. Listen to that. Go back to that. Listen to that. See, that sounds, what do you mean? What do you mean? It says a wise person got to become a fool, so they can become wise. You hear that conundrum? How do you make sense out of that? Notice what it says. He thinks he's wise. He thinks that intellect, education offers wisdom, and it doesn't. So he must become what's going to look like to the eyes of others a fool if he is to become wise. That's like saying, I got to die to live. That conundrum don't even make sense. I gotta give to get. That doesn't even make sense. These are the biblical paradoxes because we're trying to do it from logic, ration, and reason. And God says that the fool with all the logic, ration, and reason said in their heart, there is no God. So this person thinks themselves to be wise, and they become foolish so that they must become foolish so they may be wise. Look at verse 19. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness before God. For it is written, he is the one who catches the wise in their craftiness. Verse 20. And again, the Lord knows the reasoning of the wise, that they are what? Useless. God said, listen, all this philosophizing, all this stuff you coming up with, that stuff ain't none of that. You ain't gonna be able to stand before me and oratate and pontificate and make me open up the gate. Oh, that was a poem. You don't get to heaven, because you were wise in the world, Esther, you had all the wisdom in the world, and then you get before God, and God looks at your name not in the Lamb Book of Life. Say, hold on, let me display my, and as if because you have some type of intellect, you have some worth to God. The only thing that makes any of us worth to God is not anything in us, it's what? God in us. That makes us worth. He said, they go back to verse 21. I just want to say it again. I'll get to it. Verse 19. Verse 19. Sorry about that. It says, he, the one who catches their wise in their craftiness. Come on, y'all. Y'all know what that means. I ain't blowing smoke. I ain't blowing smoke. He's saying stuff, what they think. I don't know. I'm not finna use I heard it. He's gaslighting. I don't know what that means, but just saying stuff, and you think that this is your craftiness is going, and God gonna go like, oh man, that was deep. Peter, open the gate, man. that fella belong up here. That sister belong. That was deep. Get up in there and go sit at the good table up there. Move one of them prophets off the table. Go up there and sit with them. I want you in my presence. You got so much deepness. Well, I should have been using you on earth. That sounds foolish, doesn't it? But that's how the fool thinks. I'm wise enough that I can reject God and God gonna accept me because I understand. That verse right there said God catches us in all our craftiness. A fool sees through foolish eyes and turns everything into foolishness. We'll run on a couple more verses, read off some verses, and I'll just because I just want y'all to drive this home. First, I just read that Proverbs 1:7. Y'all remember it. Notice what it says. You probably quoted that today. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of what? Knowledge. You don't even have it without fear of God. You see, I tell you what you have. You have foolishness, because fools despise wisdom and instruction. So anything that we have apart from God really ain't wisdom. It may be intellect, but it ain't wisdom. So I find myself quite often having conversation with folk who are intellectually, fluent, and I be talking wisdom, and they be saying I'm talking foolishness. Another one, Proverbs 12:15. Says, the way of a fool is right in his or her own eyes, but a wise man is the one who what? Listens to counsel. The word of God. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. You better hear him get it right, because trying ain't going to get you in. You ain't going to be able to stand before God and say, I'm trying. I'm working on that now. It's too late. It's too late. We justify. I know that sister didn't mean that, but I just can't let you go with that. You can't, I'm trying. No, that's too late. Then that person has to live through the horrors of the tribulation. Proverbs 14:9. Give it to me. Proverbs 14:9 says, fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is goodwill. Man, I am not doing that with you. I know that's wrong. I'm not doing that with you. You a Christian? Okay, Christian, I ain't doing that wrong with you. Fools mock at sin, but the upright There's goodwill. Look at the next one. That would be 22 and 15. I just want to see y'all to see this word is in there. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. I know we hate, hearing that verse. And boy, this one right here, all you time out of parents, all of you go over there and think about it, parents. All of you write me a piece of paper to tell me what you did, parents. You want to remove it from them? Put the rod on them. It literally says that. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of the child. They come here like that, y'all. We just read verses in Romans. We read verses in Titus. We read verses everywhere in the Bible. We come here like that. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. But the rod of discipline, that will remove it from him or her. Now, I know some of y'all, that was foolishness I just quoted there. You don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that. I think I recently told y'all, and if she listened, I know I'm going to be in trouble, but this past Thanksgiving, our 41-year-old daughter was going out of town because the kids had went on a trip with the grandparents in Mississippi, and so she went with us to Louisiana, and she told us, she apologized because she realizes now why we did what we did and how we did it. The rod was in our home. Yeah, I hope we get this. Foolishness ain't going to be talked out of. That's why I tell you all the time, you can talk with a fool all day long. You ain't going to talk that fool into nothing. You ain't not going to talk that fool into nothing. God has to move on the heart of that fool for that fool to receive anything you said as wisdom. See, the only fools we can whoop is our children. All right, I'll move on because I'm looking at some of y'all eyes. Y'all don't like that verse. But just before we flip to the last one, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. But if you want to remove it, it ain't from time out of talking to them. You put that rod on them. All right, let's move on. Verse 26 and 11. Some folk hate that. Look at this one. Like a dog. And y'all done seen this before. That's nasty, ain't it? Returns to his own vomit is a fool who repeats their own folly. I remember the first time I was a kid, Queenie, that was the first dog we had. And I didn't know what it was, but I remember the first time I seen Queenie vomit, and I was like, oh my goodness, whoo, Queenie, let me go get that and get something to get that up. I was on the way to get that up, and I looked back, and Queenie was licking it up, eating it up again. Like, no, you ain't it. And now some of y'all want me to move on from this right there because this just talking about it seems nasty, don't it? It's just like, oh, man. God said, like a dog returns to his vomit, a fool repeats his or her own folly. Y'all, Proverbs, I'm reading on, describes the fool, the one who rejects God in favor of his or her own abominable deeds. In these very simple terms, fools hate knowledge. So when you find somebody who don't want it, you ain't got to call them that. Just know what they are. Fools find no pleasure in understanding. Fools enjoy wicked schemes. Fools proclaim foolishness. Fools spurn a parent's discipline. Fools speak perversity. Fools are quick-tempered. Fools get in trouble with their own proud speech. Fools mock at sin. Fools are deceitful. Fools despise their mother and father. Fools bring grief to their parents. Fools commit sexual immorality. A foolish woman tears down her own house. Fools are ruined, and fools are dangerous, y'all. And we're living in a world of fools. So as believers, we who appear foolish to fools Y'all, we must learn to walk wisely, in other words, godly, in the foolish world. We must learn to walk godly in a foolish world, especially if we're going to help other fools. In conclusion, a fool, by God's definition, not Boston, is someone who lacks the wisdom that comes from knowing and following God. Thank you so much, and for our virtual audience, Merry Christmas.